welcome to the Moral of the Story podcast, a show in which two cousins, a Harvard lawyer and a Baptist pastor, discuss good stories and explore their moral and ethical meanings from a Christian perspective. I'm the pastor, Colin Trisler. She is the lawyer, Evie Brydup. And Evie, today we are concluding our discussion of Cormac McCarthy's award-winning post-apocalyptic novel, The Road. Now, this is our third episode. Just a little recap. In our first episode, we walked alongside the father and his son as they found a reason to keep on living among the ashes of a dying world. And in our second episode, we looked at our two main characters and we analyzed their standard of morality to see if they really were the good guys in an objective sense. And I think we both agreed that they were doing the right thing and were objectively the good guys. And we compared them with some of the other bad guys that they met out there on the road. And in our third episode here, we're going to see how the boy starts to become a man, and not just a man, but how he starts to grow into the man that his father has raised him to be. And in this episode, specifically, we'll see how the boy starts to more fully understand the reality of the world that he lives in and how he adapts to that. We'll also see how the boy understands that he is his own person. He comes to realize that he has his own mind and he is his own man and he's not just his father's son. And we'll see him maturing and taking on responsibilities. And one thing here in regard to the father, we're going to see how the father preaches optimism to his son. Even in this world that's dying, the father preaches optimism. But in his weakened state, the father is physically dying here. He's physically getting weaker. And in his weakened state, the father himself wonders if he really believes the things that he's telling to his son. And what the boy does is the boy keeps his father's conscience intact. And we're going to see how the boy prevents all the decay and destruction that surrounds him. He prevents this world from corrupting his own father's spirit. And we'll take a look at that. And then in closing, we'll address the overall theme of the book and our final comments on the book. All right, Evie. So we're going to start off here. They're scavenging for food in a house. Now, if you remember in the last episode, they were scavenging for food in a house, and they got themselves in some trouble with the cannibal house, right? And but they still have to eat, and so they're scavenging for food, and they come across a house, and they go through it, and it's an empty house. It's safe, and they come across a questionable can of tomatoes. Okay. Now, what we want to focus on this scene here is how the boy and the father. The father's not just dictating to the boy how it's going to be. He's not treating him like a child. He starts treating him as an older boy, as somebody who is capable of thinking and making his own decisions. And they start operating as a team here. The father involves his son in the decision-making process. And there's an interesting scene here. They come across this can of tomatoes, and the father says, they're looking at them. They haven't been opened. The can, the jar there looks a little questionable. And the father says, these may be poison. He says, we'll have to cook everything really well. And he asks the boy. He involves him in the process. He says, is that okay? And the boy says, I don't know. And the dad says, well, what do you think? And the boy says, you have to say. And then the dad says, we both have to say. In other words, we both have to agree on it here. And do you think they're okay? The boy says. And the dad says, I think if we cook them really good, they'll be all right. The boy says, okay, why do you think nobody's eaten them? And the dad says, I think nobody found them. He said, you can't see the house from the road. And the boy says, we saw it. And the dad said, no, you saw it. You saw the house, because the dad didn't even see the house. The boy's the one who spotted the house. The boy studied the jar. And what do you think, the man says? And the boy says, I think we've got no choice. In other words, we've got to eat. So let's do it. And the man says, I think you're right. Let's get some wood before it gets dark. And one thing I thought was really cool about this scene, this is just a little, innocuous scene. It's not a big dramatic scene, but it really communicates a lot, because what it shows is that the boy is starting to grow up and he's starting to take on responsibilities, and the father is letting him take on responsibilities. And like I said, they're operating more as a team. And I think that's a good way of the father really doing a good job of helping his son grow into a man, helping him learn how to think for himself. I just thought that was a really cool little scene, and it really exemplifies that the father is doing that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting scene, and I think it makes a lot of sense coming after the Cannibal House incident, because the father now knows the boy has good judgment, and the boy a lot of times will say, well, I think this is a dangerous situation, and he's right. So I think in part he's trying to train the boy, but I think it's also he really wants his input. He's starting to respect him, and he's got somebody whose judgment he can seek to try to make better decisions. So I do think it's a really interesting scene.
And that is an excellent point that you bring up. This does happen after the Cannibal House. Remember what the boy's reaction was to the Cannibal House. He didn't want to be there. He sensed that something gravely wrong was going on there. And the father, in his desperation, they had to have food. They were starving, made a bad choice. And I think the father also realized that too. Maybe my son, he's also capable of thinking clearly. And maybe I should listen to him. And you think that's what he's doing here? You think the father learned a lesson?
I think that's right. I think the father, and I think he knows he can seek the son's opinion, and that he needs to do that because he's got to train the son to keep on living after he's gone. I think he knows, first of all, that he's not going to be there forever. And this boy's got to be prepared to start making decisions for himself. But on the other hand, I think he genuinely wants his son's input, because I think he's realized he's got a perspective. He picks up on things that maybe the father didn't. So yeah, I think that you're right. There's a lot going on in this one scene. It's just a few lines of dialogue, but you do see so much about where their relationship is after all they've been through together. And I think it's also interesting in a book that doesn't have like a really strong plot where you know where it's going. It's not a page turner where we're working towards an obvious end, but you do have this development in the relationship and the characters throughout. And he shows that he doesn't tell you the boy has started to grow up. He shows you that the father is seeking his input. So I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, and they even hint at that in this scene too, because he said, the boy says, "Why do you think nobody found them?" And why do you think nobody's eaten them? And the father says, "I think nobody found them. You can't see the road from the house." And the boy says, "Well, we saw it." And the dad said, "No, you saw it." Meaning the dad didn't see the house. The son saw this and was able to pick up on that. So I think you're exactly right in mentioning that. There was another scene when the father and the son, remember they found that old abandoned train in the woods, and the father went off to explore the train, and he leaves the boy behind for safety's sake. And then he hands the pistol to the boy. And like I said, this is just one of those little scenes. If you just read over it, and you can skip past it and glance over it. And I think McCarthy, it would be a disservice to skip past. I think he builds up these little scenes to where they have lots of meaning, and this is one of those little scenes that I think has a lot of meaning to it. So the father leaves the boy, says, "Stay over here. I'm going to go check out the train." And he hands the pistol to the boy. And the boy takes the pistol. Remember, there was a scene earlier, I think it was in our second episode, maybe even our first episode on the road. He handed the gun to the boy, and the boy didn't want to take it. He says, I don't want the responsibility of handling this. And the father says, "I didn't ask you what you wanted. I'm telling you to take this gun, for protection." And he kind of had to force it on the boy. Well, this time, he hands the boy the gun, and the boy takes it. And he sits with it in his lap as the man goes and explores the train. And the father sees that the train is safe. There's no danger there, and he waves the boy over. And the boy rose up, and he put the pistol in his belt. And he just stood up like a man and put the pistol in his belt like it was second nature, like he was more comfortable with it now, and then walks over to his dad. He'd seen his father do this, and he's mimicking the behavior of his father. And he's not afraid of the gun anymore. And he's not afraid of becoming a man. And I think those little scenes where, McCarthy, we talked about, he handed him the gun, and the father handed the boy the gun, and the boy didn't want it. It's almost kind of like he's just not ready to take on the responsibility of manhood at that point. But at this point here, toward the end of the story, the boy is more comfortable taking on those responsibilities of being an adult, and he's learned from his father and what of who a man is and what a man does, and I think that's what makes a difference between a boy and a man, and a girl and a woman, and just a child and an adult. Immaturity and maturity is the ability to take on the willingness to take on responsibilities of life, and then the capability of meeting those responsibilities. The boy, it's just these little things that the father has done throughout the story, and now the boy is mimicking them. And he's just these little things that show the boy is becoming a man. He's doing what his father does. And I just think little things like that's a lot of those little scenes that McCarthy puts in there. They're little scenes, but I think they communicate a whole lot. And don't you think that that's what being an adult is all about? It's acknowledging the responsibilities that reality demands of you, and you being willing to meet those responsibilities. What do you think about that?
I think so too, because it's the difference, like you said, between having it pushed upon you. I mean, you're an adult now, gun is in your hand, you got to do this, versus just taking it willingly. And that's the difference between someone who maybe has reached the age of adulthood and actually being a man or being a woman. And I think this boy is on the way to learning that.
Yes, and I think that's a testament to the father and a testament to the boy. The father is doing his job. He's setting a good example, and that's what a father does. That's what a mother does. A father shows his boy, his sons and his daughters, how an adult is supposed to act, and he does that in a masculine way. And a mother shows her sons and her daughters how an adult is supposed to act, and she does that in her feminine way. And I think children, both boys and girls, they learn a lot from the masculinity of their fathers. They learn a lot from the femininity of their mothers. And I think that this goes to show that it's the little things that parents do that really you repeat these, you meet these responsibilities, and it's almost like it kind of subliminally sinks into your children's psyche, and they say, this is the way to do it. And I think it's little things like that as parents that really have a lasting impact. It's very rarely just one big dramatic event. It's a bunch of little things over the course of time, and that's why it's so hard. That's why it's so important to set a good example all the time, every day as a parent. That should be the goal anyway. Now, obviously, we stumble and fall from time to time, but there's a lesson in that too. You show your children when you do mess up how to clean up your mess and move forward and make it right. And I think the father here does a good job of that in this story.
And I like what you're saying. It's not just what the father tells him, because I think the father does talk to him about how to be a good person, but it's much more about what he does and the decisions he makes, and the boy watching the father.
Right. Exactly.
I really like that scene where they're in the house and they find the food and it's sealed up so tight and he can't get the jars open or the cans open, and he sort of McCarthy goes through the description of how he gets it between the door and holds the lid in place. And I just thought it was interesting, just the detail of how he's surviving. But I mean, you also know the boy is watching that he's learning how to do practical things as well as how to make decisions.
Right.
And it reminded me too of that scene in the beginning where he's watching him fix the wheel of the cart.
I was just about to say that. And see, there are those little scenes where it's describing the man doing something practical, like you said, and the boy sitting there studying and watching him do it, and parents, we mentioned that in the first episode, we'll mention it again here. Kids are always watching, they're always watching you. And that's why it's on you to make sure you set a good example. And we talked about the boy growing up and willing to take on responsibilities. But if you want to meet your responsibilities, you have to be able to think for yourself. And there's a little section here in the book, I'm going to read just a little part of it, where the boy starts to think for himself and with rationality. He's not just, his father's not just telling him what to do, and the boy is just not, blindly doing it. And I just wanted to read something real quick. They go into another house, and the boy's still a little cautious about it, but the father, saying, "Well, we got to look and see what's there." And there's this scene here ends with a typical parent-child interaction here, and that's why I want to read it. So just bear with me for a second. The boy didn't want to go upstairs. He tried to reason with him. There could be blankets up there, the father said. We need to take a look. And the boy said, I don't want you to go up there. The father says, there's no one here. There's no one here in the house. And the boy says, there could be. There's no one here. Don't you think they'd have come down by now? The father said. And the boy said, maybe they're scared. And the father says, I'll tell them we won't hurt them. And maybe they're dead. And then the father says, then they won't mind if we take a few things. Look, whatever's up there, it's better to know about it than to not know. The boy says, why? The father says, why? Well, because we don't like surprises. Surprises are scary, and we don't like to be scared. And there could be things up there that we need. We have to take a look. Okay. And the father says, okay, just like that? And the boy says, well, you're not going to listen to me. And the father says, I have been listening to you. And the boy says, not very hard. And the father says, there's no one here. There has been no one here for years. There are no tracks in the ash. Nothing disturbed. No furniture burned in the fireplace. There's food here. And then the boy says, tracks don't stay in the ash. You said so yourself. The wind blows them away. And the father just says, I'm going up. Yeah, the son uses his own logic and his own words against him. But you said this. The father's like, there are no tracks in the ashes. And the boy says, but you said that the wind blows the ashes and can blow the tracks away. And the father is like, yeah, I did say that. I'm going up anyway. And that's just, right. Even in the midst of the apocalypse, that you're still typical parent relationship. But kids are always like, but Dad, you said this. And you're like, I did say that. You're right. But look, I just think that those dynamics, even no matter the circumstances, they're always there. And see, the boy is now actually respectfully questioning his father. He's going back and forth with him, a little. I mean, he's not being a punk about it. He's being respectful. No. The boy has his thoughts, and the father's trying to, keep him, hear what he has to say. And the boy he's growing up, and that's one thing that comes with growing up. As a child, as a younger child, you just kind of blindly follow your parents around. You trust them that what they say is right. And as you get a little bit older and your cognitive abilities begin to develop a little bit more, you start to ask, well, why? And then he remembers what the father said then, and he uses that logic against him here. And that's all just part of growing up. And this shows that the son is thinking for himself. And I think that not just being aware of responsibilities, and you've got to really be an adult, you have to meet your responsibilities. And if you want to be an adult and meet your responsibilities, then you have to be able to think rationally. You have to be able to think logically. And I think this is testimony that the boy is learning how to do that.
I think that's right. I mean, everything the boy is saying is logical and reasonable. The father is basically, I think, thinking, well, you have a point, but we've got to do it anyway. That's the bottom line. But the boy's not being ridiculous by any means. He's presenting good reasons for what he's saying.
Right, and he's not being a coward. Yeah, he's not. No. He's not just blindly.
He sees things, and he knows how the world is.
Right, and I think that in this you get into more masculine tendencies, and I think men. I know that men just kind of by nature, and I'm speaking with broadly here, are more more apt to take risks than like women are. I think that's more of a masculine trait, and I think that the boy is a little hesitant to take a risk here. But I mean, and the father is not being reckless. I mean, the father has evidence too. And that's just part of growing up and being a man as well, is you have to be willing to take certain risks. I mean, calculated risk. This isn't just an irrational risk the man is taking. He's taking a calculated risk here too. And I think that's part of growing up too. And he's showing the boy how to do that. Here's the evidence as to why I think this is okay. And, and then they eventually just kind of, the father just gets tired of arguing with, look, I'm going up. You can stay here. I'm going up. And I think that's part of being an adult as well, is learning to think for yourself and then taking those risks. He's seeing the father, those calculated risks. I think he's seeing the father do that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it kind of goes back to the last episode where the boy was the one who wanted to take the risk and talk to people, and the father wasn't willing to risk that. So it's kind
Right.
of, you're seeing that on both sides. And the boy is kind of learning how to interact with the world, and that sometimes you take risks, sometimes you don't. And sometimes it's just not clear what you should do, but you have to do something.
That is an excellent point, and I didn't even think about that, but you're exactly right. And let's look at what they're risking. The father is willing to take a calculated risk when it comes to survival, and the
Yeah.
boy is willing to take calculated risks when it comes to more relational aspects, like reaching out to other people. And
That's true.
that's an excellent point. I didn't even consider that, but that's you're exactly right about that. And that's one thing I really like about this book, and because it's true, if you're really being a good parent, you teach your children and they learn from you. But as a parent, if you are really interacting with your children, you will learn from them too. And you have to be open to learning from your children. You can't assume that your children know nothing. You're closing your mind off if you just think, I have nothing to learn from you. And that's what the father here, I think he realizes he has a lot to learn from his son as well. And I think that's a good dynamic in a parent-child relationship is learning from each other.
Yeah, because everybody is limited. And I think part of growing from adolescence to adulthood is being aware of your own limits. I mean, I think everybody at some point as a young adult or teenager, you think you know a lot more than you do. And I think that part of crossing that line is learning you don't know everything, and you might have something to learn from a child or from anybody.
Right. I think that's exactly true. All right, Evie. Okay, so this whole, up to this point, they've been making their way down south toward the coast. Okay, that's been their goal. And they never really officially stated why they were doing that. One reason it was stated was because they needed to find warmer weather. It was cold, and he said they wouldn't survive much longer in this northern colder region, so they have to move down to the south to try to find warmer weather. And the boy was thinking, maybe there are people here. Maybe will there be other people there? And the father's like, maybe, and so the son is really hoping, he has his hopes up to find something here when they get to the coast. That's been their goal through this whole story. And so they finally make their way to the coast. They get to the beach, and what is it? It looks like a beach in the realm of the dead, right? They finally get to the coast, and it's empty. There are bones and stuff. The sea is gray. It's still rather cold there, and I think that's just, there's a scene where the boy went swimming in the cold water. And when he came out, the father put a blanket on him, and he noticed that the boy was crying. And the father says, what is it? And the boy says, nothing. And the father says, no, tell me. And the boy says, nothing, it's nothing. And then McCarthy kind of leaves it there. He never explains why the boy was crying. And it didn't hit me till just recently. I think the boy was crying because he was disappointed that there wasn't more there at the beach. There was no society, no people, no community of good people. I think the boy was really hoping for that. And it was just like everything else,
Getting to the coast has been the hope that has kept them going the whole story. And now they're there, and it's hard to see how anything has changed.
Right, yeah, nothing has changed. It's just like everywhere else, And there's one scene, I want to read the dialogue here. They sit down there on the beach. It's just the two of them. And they sit down there on the beach, and they're kind of looking out, over the water. And the boy says, do you think there could be ships out there? And the father says, I don't think so. And then the boy says, they wouldn't be able to see very far. The father says, no, they wouldn't. Then the boy says, what's on the other side? And like the other side of the world, the other side of the sea there, which you could kind of, if you want to take this in a C.S. Lewis, kind of reference, what's on the other side of the sea? What's on the other side of this life, kind of thing, what's on the other side? And the father says, nothing. And the boy says, there must be something. And then he says, maybe there's maybe there's a father and his little boy, and they're sitting on the beach, and that would be okay. Yes, that would be okay. And the boy says, and they could be carrying the fire too. And the boy said, and the father says, yes, they could. Yes. And the boy says, but we don't know. And the man says, no, we don't know. And the boy says this. So we have to be vigilant. And the father says, we have to be vigilant, yes. And then the boy says, how long can we stay here? And the father says, I don't know. We don't have much to eat. And
It says that he's, quote, I'm sorry.
No. And I think that's just, the father is kind of losing his optimism almost a little bit. There's nothing out there. And the boy's like, well, maybe there could be, there could be a father and his boy just like us, carrying the fire, good people sitting over there, and then I like how the boy says, we have to be vigilant, that we have to carry the fire, we have to be vigilant. And that's a very mature thing to say, and he's learned that from his father. And I just, I think that you don't know what's over there. So you can't just be recklessly optimistic, but you do have to be, I think, cautiously optimistic, like Ronald Reagan used to say, trust but verify. I think that's a good approach to life. And I think that's what the boy means by vigilant, and I just think that this is a real mature thing to say for the boy. It's he's thinking in a mature way. What do you think?
To me, when I read it, so we have to be vigilant, I feel like he's quoting back something his father told him. And yes. I do think it's a mature thing to say, but I think I feel like he's quoting verbatim something the father has probably repeated to him many times.
It would be a good study to go back and see if this was said earlier in the book in some way. The father's saying we have to be vigilant, And the boy, and he may be repeating it verbatim back, but he's understanding the father's mindset there. So this is what you mean by we have to be vigilant. I've got an older daughter, and she's 24, and she's gotten into this habit of coming up to me, oh, Evie, and I just welcome this. She'll say, you know what? You know what you told me 10 years ago? It turns out you were right the whole time. And I'm like, yes, tell me how right I was back then. You didn't believe I was right back then, but now you're seeing that you're that I'm right now. And she's growing up very well. And I do think you're right there. This probably is something that he heard the father say, but the son is starting to understand what his father meant better now, than he did back then. And that's just part of maturing. You understand why your parents say some of the things they do. You know how kids are. I'll never tell my kids that, when I get to have kids, or I'll never say that. And then there you are as an adult or whatever, saying the same things your parents said. And I just think that's a typical parent-child relationship. And it's quite funny.
Yeah, and you see how well he's drawn the characters, because, I mean, like you're saying, you see real human relationships. I mean, he's depicting, you can recognize what he's showing in the parent-child relationship. But also, the reason I feel like he's quoting the father back, I don't know if the father said that anywhere earlier in the book, but you hear the father's voice in that. You have such a sense of who the father is and what kind of things he says and what kind of things the son says. And it's, you hear, to me, I hear the father's voice in that phrase. It's the kind of thing he would say, whether he said it before in the book or not.
That is exactly
right. It's how well he's depicted these characters that you could pick a line and probably who has said it.
Right, exactly. And that's just a testament to the writing, the quality of the author's writing there. You're
Exactly.
All right, so now we've had these sweet little moments here, but let's not forget, okay, as we move forward, the father's been coughing up blood since the beginning of the story, pretty much. And his death has been kind of this looming shadow that's kind of overshadowing, the entire story here. And I think we get a little foreshadowing of that here with this scene out there on the beach. They see this old abandoned ship. I mean, like a big freighter ship sort of thing, or like a cruise ship or something like that. And the father goes to explore it. And I think there's some subtext here. Now, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I don't think so. McCarthy is very big on subtext. He doesn't just come out and say things. That's why you have to be really mentally involved when you read a Cormac McCarthy novel, because there's so much subtext involved. And they see the abandoned ship. The father goes to explore, and he needs the son to stay behind and watch their stuff. Okay. And there's a little bit of dialogue here on page 238 in my book. And the boy says, what are you going to do, Papa? And the father says, take a look. And the boy says, can I go with you? And the father says, no, I want you to stay here. I want to go with you. You have to stand guard. And besides, the water's deep. Will I be able to see you? Yes, the father says, I'll keep checking on you to make sure everything's okay. The boy says, I want to go with you. And then the father stopped and he says, you can't, he said. Our clothes would blow away. Somebody has to take care of things. And I think that this is a kind of a foreshadowing of the father's death. The father is going somewhere where the boy can't go. He's going across the sea there, to the other side of death. And the boy has to stay behind and carry the fire. He can't follow his father here. And I just kind of think this is really cool. You have to stay behind and watch our stuff. You have to make sure that everything remains safe. And I think that this is just a way of you have to stay. I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
But you have to stay here and make sure everything's okay. You have to keep carrying that fire. And like I said, as McCarthy's real big on subtext, and that's just kind of the subtext I got from that scene.
I think you're right, and he's not obvious or hackneyed about it. I mean, it's subtle, but I think you're exactly right. I think it echoes back at the end of the story. Yes,
it does, and we'll get into the father's death there later on, so I don't want to dwell too much on it here. And so the father goes, and they rummage around. He finds some supplies there on the boat. He comes back. And then, again, there's another little subtext thing here that I think kind of foreshadows something that's going to happen here in just a second, this incident with the guy who does, in fact, steal their stuff. It's starting to get dark out there on the beach, and the darkness catches them, and they lose their way on the beach, and they have to find their way back. And over here, the boy says, is the dark going to catch us? And I think the dark kind of represents, some sort of malicious, evil sort of, darkness here, some kind of moral darkness. And the father says, I don't know. And the boy says, it is, isn't it? And the father says, come on, we'll hurry. So they're trying to get back to their stuff. And, before it gets too dark, it's starting to kind of rain. And McCarthy says the darkness did catch them. By the time they reached the headland path, it was too dark to see anything. They stood in the wind from off the sea with the grass hissing all about them and the boy holding onto his hand. We just have to keep going, the man said. Come on. The boy says, I can't see. The man says, I know. We'll just take it one step at a time. Okay, the boy says. And the father says, don't let go. Okay, no matter what, the father says. And the boy says, no matter what. And, even in the midst of this darkness, you still have to keep plowing through. Hold on to what's real. Hold on to what's good. Never let go. Again, you do have to be vigilant there. And as we're going to see, the darkness does catch them. And, the man kind of thinks of his life there, and he's starting to kind of lose hope here a little bit. I mean, I don't want to read from all portions of the story, but the man kind of starts, that darkness does kind of seep into the man's spirit here. And we're about to see that come to fruition with how he treats the guy who steals their stuff. And McCarthy, like I said, is kind of foreshadowing it here. The darkness does catch him. The man thinks about his life. He has kind of some cynical little inner dialogue here. And, he knows death is kind of coming upon him, and he wants his son to be prepared. He wants to leave his son supplied, but and that's that thought, knowing that he's about to be separated from his son, things kind of starting to wear on him, kind of give him a bit of a bad attitude. And we're about to see that bad attitude manifest itself here. Yeah, I like what you're saying about giving a motivation for the father's actions and the way he treats this man who tries to steal their things. Because I think, again, this is another instance of the man taking an action that we don't approve of. We don't like it. It makes us uncomfortable, and yet we understand why he did it. And I do appreciate what you're saying, because you really do see that motivation, that what he's been carrying, the burden that he's been carrying is wearing on him. And you can see what led him to that point. Right. And McCarthy, before we get to this point here with the thief, there's one other little part here that it's really cool. They're caught in the rain. It's dark. They're trying to find their way back. They're trying to find their way back to their tarp and stuff. And the son says, the father says, I think I saw our tracks, and they are in danger of having their tracks in the sand get blown away and washed away by the rain. And so they're trying desperately to find these tracks. He says, I think I see him, so we can find our stuff. And the son says, so we're going the right way. Yes, the right way. And the son says, I'm really cold, Papa. And the father says, I know, pray for lightning. Okay, so they're in the midst of this storm, and they need, in the midst of all this chaos around them, pray for some flash of light so we can see where we're going. And they went on, and then look, McCarthy just goes right into it here. When the light broke over the beach again, he saw that the boy was bent over and he was whispering to himself. So there is, in fact, lightning, because the lightning is flashing, and the man is able to see the boy, and the boy's kind of bent over talking to himself. So I kind of wonder here, is he praying for something, because the father said, pray for lightning. Yeah, it wasn't just hope for lightning. He said, pray for lightning. And the son he could see that his son was mumbling to himself. And so I kind of think the boy is actually praying there. And, they keep going on, and they're kind of losing hope a little bit. And then some more lightning. It's one other flash of lightning. And then it says that it's all but gone. So they kept walking, and they didn't find their stuff. But the lightning was able to lead them in the right direction. And then it says, a shift in the wind, and he heard a distant faint patter. And then the father said, stop, listen. And the boy said, what is it? The father said, listen. The boy says, I don't hear anything. The father says, come on. The boy says, what is it, Papa? Then he says, he could hear that distant faint pattering. And he says, it's the tarp. The rain is falling on the tarp. And so, see, the lightning, provided just enough light to lead them close enough in the right direction. And then he said the lightning all but stopped, but then they were close enough to hear that patter, the rain falling on their tarp, which was covering their stuff. And they were able to make their way back to it. And I think it's little things like that, because McCarthy used the word pray. And I do believe that this is kind of his way of explaining how God uses unconventional means to lead us. You know what I mean? And he said, pray for lightning, and there was lightning. And then the lightning stops, but the lightning had led them close enough to where they could hear the patter on their tarp. And I think this is just kind of a cool way of saying, trusting in God's providential leadership, even in the midst of a storm. God is going to send storms in our lives, and we're going to feel hopeless and lost, and we're going to feel like, why has God abandoned us? There must be nothing out there. But then he's going to give us just enough light and give us and lead us in the right direction. And I think McCarthy is kind of hinting at that here. I mean, what do you think? Am I as a preacher reading too much into this?
No, I don't think so. I hadn't thought of that reading through it, but I think it really resonates. And, I think throughout the book, he's used the image of little pinpricks of light that are sort of leading them on the way. And I think you're right. I think he's repeating it here, and we're almost getting an image of the journey that they've made, of just a little bit of light leading them further and further to get to a point. And they don't, throughout the story, they haven't known exactly what they're heading for, or what kind of, what they have some hope, and they're following something, and they're not sure what. And I think you're right. I think this is kind of an image of that whole journey that they're making, and also that the way God works in our lives as well, that a lot of times you're seeing 5 feet in front of you. You don't see exactly where you're going to, you might make your own 5-year plan, but you don't know where you're going to be. You see just enough that you have to trust. You have to go forward and trust that once you get 5 feet ahead, then you're going to see a little bit further.
Right. And one thing, when the light had gone away, they had to use another sense in order to see where they were. So they weren't able to see, but he could hear now, and sometimes God doesn't just shine a spotlight on what we need to do. Right. He causes it, because the father was like, no, stop and listen, be quiet. Kind of like with Elijah, he was hiding in that cave, and the wind came and the fire came and the earthquake came and all that stuff, but God wasn't in any of that. And then God was in this still small whisper, and I do think that, while you do have these big flash, God does send big flashes of lightning, to light our way at times. That there are also those times when we have to just stop, be quiet, and listen. Sometimes the light goes away. We just listen. We can see where we need to go. And I think McCarthy does an excellent job of portraying that walk through life in this book. And I like what you said there. That's kind of a theme in the book. There are these little pinpricks of light all throughout darkness. And there is a lot, and that's what keeps this book and McCarthy's books from being just nihilistic and bleak. And I think when people say that his books are nihilistic, I think they misunderstand. Let's be honest. The world is a hard place. The world can be a tough, there's a lot of beauty in the world. There's a lot of things to love and a lot of great things in the world. But there are a lot of hard things. There's a lot of hardship. And this world is a mixture of order and chaos. And this world is a mixture of pleasure and suffering. And suffering is a big element of life. And anybody who tells you that it's not is lying or naive, and they don't know what's going on. There is a lot of dark.
As Wesley said in the Princess Bride, Wesley said, life is pain, and anyone who says anything different is selling something.
That's exactly right. But it's not just pain. Anybody that tells you that they can cure all the pain here, they can't right here in this life. But McCarthy does have a good grasp on reality. There is a lot of darkness, but there is not the existence is not completely devoid of light, and it's not completely devoid of meaning, and that's what keeps this from slipping into some sort of nihilistic sort of outlook. There are, even in the midst of a storm, lightning can be very dangerous, obviously. But lightning is big and it's powerful and it's loud and it's scary. But the Father was like, pray for this lightning so we can see, and even in the midst of chaotic storms, that lightning that comes as a result of that storm will still light our way. And that's just a good metaphor for life. You have to be vigilant and you have to use all of your senses. Sometimes you're going to be able to see. Sometimes you're not going to be able to see. You're going to have to hear. You're going to have to think. And just know that God is leading you in the right direction, that you pray for lightning and he will give you that lightning. He's going to give you the storm, but he's also going to provide that lightning in the midst of the storm too. And that's one thing I think this is what really makes me trust in Jesus Christ. Okay. Mm-hmm. I love Jesus Christ for so many reasons, but reading through the Bible, he always shoots you straight. He never tells you, he never tries to sugarcoat anything, nor does he make you feel hopeless either. He always tells you, you're going to have hardship. You think of that parable of the wise man who built his house on the rock and the fool who built his house on the sand. It rained and stormed and on both of them. The wind and the rain, it hit both of those houses extremely hard, right? But the difference was the wise man who built his house on the rock, he survived and he made it through that storm. And the fool who built his house on the sand, his house completely fell apart and great was its destruction. And that's a good metaphor. That's a good lesson about life. Storms are going to hit wise people and fools. Storms are going to hit everybody, and you're always going to be rocked by the wind and the rain and the waves of life. Everybody is, good or bad. But a wise man, a wise woman, who builds his or her life on the rock of God's wisdom, of the truth, they will survive. Whereas a fool who builds his house on shifting sands, who has no foundation, will be completely destroyed. Jesus really shoots you straight. He tells you there's suffering, there's hardship, but there's light and there's reward at the end of it. And those who persevere will receive that reward. And I'm going to tell you, there is darkness. There's great darkness, but the light is stronger. The light is better. The darkness gets confused by the light. So great is the light, so powerful is it. And you stay in the light and you move through the darkness, and you will not just survive life, but you will be victorious. You will have a reward waiting for you. And I just really appreciate people who just tell the truth. Jesus says, there's going to be hardship, but there's reward. And I'm telling you how it is. And I think McCarthy kind of has a good grasp on that here. There's darkness and hardship, but there's also light out there. And there's meaning to be found, and there's meaning to be had in the midst of all that darkness.
Yeah, and to go back to the lightning image, so often God does work that way. He'll light a little bit. We don't see the future clearly, but we see enough to trust him. But a lot of times I'll think, well, I wish I could see all of it. Why can't we just have daylight? And We can't, because where we are now, we're in a fallen world, and God wants us to trust him. It's more important that we should rely on him than that we need to, that we should, it's more important that we should rely on him than that we should know everything that's going to happen. We just can't. We have to understand our dependence on him, our weakness and littleness.
And we have to watch for that light that he sends when he sends it. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, we can't control the lightning. We can't just flip a switch and turn the lights on in life. When God sends that lightning and he sends those flashes of light, you better be looking and you better take advantage of it, or else you're going to miss it. I mean, God does act that way. I mean, he treats us like the Father treats the Son. I'll hold your hand, and what you can't do for yourself, I will do for you. You can't save yourself. Okay. I'll do that for you,
Right.
Because you can't do that. I'll do that. But I expect I'm not going to treat you like a baby. You know, there are things that you can do for yourself. And I've taught you and I've shown you, and I expect you I'll be right there with you to help you. And that's the father relationship with his children. And God does that when he provides those opportunities, those flashes of scary lightning. They can be scary and loud, but there's also a lot of benefit in that. And when he sends it, you better be paying attention, because he expects us to put forward some effort in this too.
I think that's exactly right.
There's one other thing. Now, I'm not just a preacher who's reading God into a story that I like. I'm not doing that, okay? He mentioned the word pray for lightning, and God sent lightning, and it lit their way, and they were able to make their way back, okay? Now, the storm has passed. When the father was going through the wreckage of the ship, he found a flare pistol in there, okay? And so I wanted to read something. He loaded the flare pistol, all right, and they wanted to just shoot it. The boy wanted to shoot the flare pistol to see what it was like. And the father asked the boy if he wanted to shoot it. And the boy says, "You shoot it, Papa. You know how to do it." And the father says, "Okay." And he cocked the gun and aimed it out over the bay and pulled the trigger. The flare arced up into the murk with a long whoosh and broke somewhere out over the water in a cloud of light and hung there. The hot tendrils of magnesium drifted slowly down the dark, and the pale foreshore tide started in the glare and slowly faded. He looked down at the boy's upturned face. So this is like the one small little fireworks show in the midst of the apocalypse, a flare gun, and the boy's just looking up at it. And the boy was hoping, and then the boy says this. He said, "They couldn't see very far, could they, Papa?" And the father says, "Who?" And the boy says, "Anybody." And the father says, "No, not far." And the boy says, "If you wanted to show where you were." So the boy wanted to shoot the flare gun so maybe other people could see where he really has a sense of community. He wants to be around people. And he says, "If you wanted to show where they were." And the father says, "You mean like to the good guys?" And the boy says, "Yes, or anybody that you wanted them to know where you were." And the father says, "Like who?" He says, and the boy says, "I don't know." And the father says, "Like God?" And the boy says, "Yeah, maybe somebody like that." And so, I mean, God is being brought up, and them, like God sent lightning from them to the sky to lead them, and now they're sending light back up into the sky, to try to signal to God, And the boys like, "Yeah, somebody like that." And I think McCarthy, I don't know the man personally, obviously. I just based on this book here, and I could be totally wrong. He's got. It seems like kind of an interesting concept of God. Like maybe there's a God there. I kind of think there is, but I don't know. If I talk to him, will he hear me? I don't know. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think I'm reading too much of this religious imagery into the story. I think he's putting it there because God signaled to them, and now they're trying to signal back to God. And the boy really is longing for somebody out there. God, other people. He wants to know that there is other good out there. And I don't think I'm just a preacher who's reading religious imagery into it. It's there. I mean, wouldn't you agree it's there?
Oh, I would agree. And some of it is so explicit, and then you have so many mentions of God. And the other thing I would say is, yes, I think McCarthy puts these things in the story intentionally. But whether he intends a certain message or not, if he's writing a good story and we're getting it from the story, we're not projecting it from the moral that we wanted to find in the story, but it's organic to the story itself. In some ways, it goes beyond what he personally intended. I think a lot of times an author will write a story and it says things even they didn't know. And I think that's part of why we read these stories.
I think you're exactly right. And there's one other thing here I put in the notes I want to mention. McCarthy frequently describes his the son in religious terms. And it was right here toward the end of the book. He says that the father's kind of looking at the boy, and he describes it this way: the boy glowing in that waste like a tabernacle. You know, so he describes there's all this waste around, but the boy glows within that waste. And he says like a tabernacle. Now, what does a tabernacle do? The boy as a temple to house divine fire. You look in the Old Testament, and that's what one of the purposes of the tabernacle, the temple was. That's where the presence of God dwelt, and they would burn incense there, and it housed that divine fire and the divine presence of God there. And he frequently, and he refers to the boy, he almost looks to the boy as, and he mentioned that in this conversation with the old man, what if I said that he was a god? Because the old man kind of thought, I thought when I saw this boy that he was an angel, you know, because he just didn't see any life, and he didn't see anything so innocent and pure in this dead world. And he says, I thought maybe he was an angel. And the father says, what if I said he was a god? You know, and the boy is the man's reason. It's his top value. It's his reason for being on this earth. Because if the boy wasn't here, the father would just go ahead and take his life. And if the boy ever died before the father did, the father said, I would take my life too, because I want to be with you, you know. And the boy is his motivation. The boy is his guiding light. And as we're going to see here in just a second when we get to this part with the thief, the boy is the one who keeps the man's conscience, keeps his integrity intact. And he redeems the man almost. He keeps him from becoming hard and dead like this world. He keeps that fire burning within the man's spirit. And so again, that's just another example. I'm not reading religious imagery into the book. It's there. McCarthy's pretty blatant about it. I agree.
I absolutely agree. And one more aspect to the tabernacle imagery. So McCarthy's got a Catholic background, and in the Catholic Church, the tabernacle is where the Eucharist is stored. And I think that's a very powerful image that he's bringing into this book. This boy bears Christ to his father. He has that communion with God, and he's sharing that with his father. He is a temple. He is a tabernacle. God is within him. And I think that's something as Christians that we do. And this is just explicit. We're not reading this in as a metaphor. This is just the language of the book.
The father goes to the boy to find purity and innocence and righteousness in this filth, this filthy, dead world. And he goes to his son, just like the Jewish people in the Old Testament would go to the temple, and that's where they would find their forgiveness. That's where they would find their meaning and their purpose and purity and righteousness. That's where God dwelt. And the father is treating his boy that way. He sees that innocence in his son. He sees that light and that fire in his son. And I think it's also another thing too. Frequently in the Old Testament, the presence of God, one of the ways God manifested himself was with fire. That often indicated the presence of God, here, at least here on the physical plane. And I think that's also just another nod to carrying the fire, that fire as a religious symbol here. I think this is all pretty obvious.
Yeah, and it's picked up again at the end of the book where the woman is saying the breath of God was his breath, yet though it passed from man to man through all of time. I mean, that's the end of the book. But I mean, I think it's not just the boy who bears Christ to his father, but the father bears Christ to his son in their flawed ways. And that's kind of what gives you hope for relationships, that in all of our brokenness and in the middle of the waste, Christ is there with us and in other people.
Right, exactly. And that's what the presence of the Holy Spirit is within the church, and he is God. And that's why we are, Paul calls us, our bodies, the temple of God, because that's where the presence of God dwells. And here in this new covenant era, if you've got, been saved by Christ, you have the indwelling presence of the Holy Spirit within you. And so, in a sense, like McCarthy frames it here, we all, those who are saved, are carrying that fire of God within us, that fire of morality, that fire of truth, and the actual presence of God who redeems us and makes us reborn into new men and women to reflect the image of Christ. The Holy Spirit is the one who gives transmutes Christ's righteousness to us. He's that down payment, on that inheritance of eternal life that we will have in the future. And I think, like you said, whether McCarthy intended any of this or not, I really do believe it's there in the text, because he does overtly express this in religious terms.
I think that's exactly right. I think he did intend it to a certain extent, because that's the language that he's using. That's the imagery that he's using. So we're not reading it into it, but I think there may be even more there.
Right.
Than he realized he was putting into it.
And here's how the boy thinks. And this has been one of the wheelhouses of the boy throughout the story. The father goes to the ship. He brings stuff back, gets some supplies and stuff. And the boy is so adamant about not taking what doesn't belong to him. He wanted to make sure that his father wasn't taking this from other people. The plunder from the ship, and it was very important to the boy to know that they're not thieves, that they're not stealing something from somebody else, and that's the way the boy thinks. That's how he physically manifests that fire that's within him. He doesn't want to steal. He wants to do, and even if it means going hungry, I don't want to compromise my integrity. I want to do the right thing. And that's how McCarthy shows the boy. He doesn't just say the boy's carrying the fire. He shows it by the boy doing stuff like this. And remember back when they found the bunker under the ground, the boy wanted to make sure they weren't stealing that. And the boy's been very adamant throughout this whole story. I don't want to steal from anybody. I don't want to take from anybody. And everything they have, he's always been very grateful for it. Now, that's been the boy's attitude. That's been a theme throughout the book. Now we get to what we've been talking about here, this scene with the thief. And they leave their stuff unattended. A man comes along the beach and he steals their belongings. He takes their belongings, okay? And the father and the son realize that their stuff has been stolen. They still have the gun, okay? But their stuff has all been stolen. And they give chase, and they find the man. They're able to chase him down. And now, and as we're going to see here, I want to talk about this real quick before we get into what happens. Somebody stole from them, and in this world, the boy is doing the right thing. He wants to make sure they're not thieves. But there are thieves in the world, and the boy made such an effort not to steal, yet other people in the world are not as moral as the boy, right? There's obviously this man here who is willing to steal from somebody else, to take something that's not his. Now, that being said, the thief is not as bad as some of the people that we've encountered here on the road. I mean, right? There's a big difference between finding somebody's stuff and just taking it versus taking people as slaves and eating people, and compared to some of the other evil they've come across. But the thief is still morally wrong. But he's still wrong here. But when they confront the thief, they confront him, and the father levels the gun at him, and rather than putting up a fight, I think the thief has a knife or some sort of weapon, and instead of putting up a fight, the boy, and McCarthy pointed this out, the thief sees the boy, and then he gives it all back. So this man, this guy who stole, he realized that he's stealing stuff from a kid. And this man, even though he was a thief, and that's wrong, I'm not defending him being a thief, he at least has a little bit of a conscience there, and gives back what he stole, right? And here's how the father responds to that. The thief did the right thing. He made a mistake, okay? And he's not right for stealing. But he gave it back without a fight. He saw the boy, he said, "Here, take it." Now, what does the father do here? Rather than just take their stuff back and let's just part ways, the father gives himself over to anger and vengeance. And I think the father, all of this stuff, his impending death, all the stress and the pressure of living in this world, it just kind of bubbles up to the surface and it clouds the man's judgment. And he momentarily, the father does, releases, his grasp on morality and humanity. And what does he do to the thief? He strips the thief of everything that he owns, which is really nothing but his clothes and his shoes. And he leaves the man standing there naked. And he thinks that's okay. He says, I'm going to do what you did to us. Take off your clothes. I'm going to take from you just like you took from us. Every stitch, everything. And they leave him there naked in the road. And the man, I guess, acts like that's justice or something, when that's just blind vengeance is all that is. And of course, the son doesn't agree with this course of action. He's crying and he's begging his father to stop it and to give his stuff back. And the father, here, on page 276 in my book, the father basically tells him to stop caring. And the boy's crying. And the father says, stop it. And the boy says, I can't stop it. And the father says, what do you think would have happened to us if we hadn't caught him? Just stop it. And the boy says, I'm trying. But the boy is, his conscience is eating at him here. He knows they've done the wrong thing, that the father has done the wrong thing. And the father is basically telling the boy, stop caring, stop worrying about what's right. We're right to do this. This man, he could have taken everything from us. And now we're going to, take everything from him. And this really scares the boy. It really unnerves the boy. Yeah. And the boy eventually brings the man back to his senses and convinces him this is wrong, and convinces his father to give the thief his clothes and stuff back, And the father really gives himself over to the darkness. We talked about, on the beach, the darkness going to catch up with us? And the darkness catches them. And that happened there literally on the beach, but I think metaphorically here, the darkness has caught up with the father, and he is now acting like the other people in the world. He's not carrying the fire here. The darkness has overcome the man, and the son is the one who has to bring him back into the light. And the father is just objectively wrong here. He handled this situation wrong, and showed no forgiveness, showed no reason, no rationality here. This is just blind anger. He just gives himself over to anger. And it's the boy who has to rescue the father here. And one last thing, the father has been protecting his boy from all the physical threats in this dangerous world. And I think here we see, in a sense, and this is its biggest moment here, the son is protecting the father from all the spiritual threats in the world, from becoming too cold and too callous and too hard. The boy is keeping the man from protecting him spiritually. He's protecting him from giving himself over to the darkness. The boy, in a sense, has been watching over the father's soul this whole movie, just like the father, and this whole story, just like the father has been watching over the son's body, the son's watching over the father's soul here and keeping his integrity intact.
I think that's true, but I think it does go both ways, because part of how the boy has the moral compass that he has is that his father has taught him. His father has told him these stories about how they help people. And of course, the boy immediately recognizes the hypocrisy, I guess. It says, well, you tell me stories where we help people. We never do help people. But still, the boy has gotten that from his father, that this would be a good thing. This is the ideal way to live. And then the boy is comparing what his father has said to what his father did. And in this case, it's for his father's own advantage, because he teaches it back to his father, the thing that his father taught to him.
That's exactly right. And I'm glad that you mentioned the story thing there, because it mentioned earlier in the book that the father would tell his son stories of courage and justice, and the son, and those stories are that's why Jesus taught in parables so often, is because stories have an excellent way, like Ayn Rand says, they have an excellent way of communicating morality in reality. I'm summarizing what she said there, but it shows how to live out your principles in reality. That's what stories do, and they give, like Jordan Peterson said, stories give image and word to your convictions. It allows you to show how your convictions can come to life. And the father would tell his son those stories of courage and justice, and the son notices here, just like you said, we're not acting like the heroes in those stories you told us. You told me we're not acting like that. And the boy really prevents the father from going off the deep end here, because I think that if the father had done this, like we talked about in the last episode, you don't just start, the world ends and the next day you start eating and killing people. It's a progression. It's a series of steps that gets you there. And I think this, had the father gotten away with this and the boy not been there, he would have gone on that path of darkness to where eventually you're going to start acting like these other evil people. This is a first step on that pathway of evil, doing stuff like this, giving yourself over to just those irrational anger and vengeance. And the boy really saved the father's soul here. Like you mentioned.
He really did.
You mentioned the boy being like a representation of Christ. He really saved the man's soul here. By correcting what he did. I mean, right?
He did, and I think this is another example too of how God sanctifies us, because he gives us the grace to love him, and it's the love that we have for him that helps us we want to become better because we love him and because he loved us first. But you also see this with the father and the son. The father loves his son, and so when the son comes to him and says, "Oh, I'm disappointed in the way you acted," he takes it seriously because of the love he has for the son. Whereas if just someone were to come up to him and say, "What you're doing is wrong," but it's not someone you love, it's not someone you have that relationship with, it doesn't mean the same thing.
He respects his son's opinion.
Yes.
Right? He respects his son's judgment. And like you said, that's an excellent point. If somebody else makes this, the father, man, I don't care what you think. But the fact that his son pointed this out, well, that means something to the father because he cares what his son thinks. And he really aspires to be like his son in a way, because that's what you do with that's one of the roles of God, is to set the example for us. He didn't just give us the rules. I mean, Christ came and lived out the law and lived out the rules and set the example for us. And that's what the son has done. And look, as parents, we're guilty of this all the time. You don't make a habit of doing stuff like this. You don't make this a lifestyle. But I mean, let's be honest. There are times when I lose my patience, or I lose my temper, or I have to say, "Son, I'm sorry I raised my voice to you like that. Daddy didn't handle that right." Or you often have to apologize to your children, and you have to acknowledge when you, at least I think this is responsible parenting, is acknowledging when you've set a bad example, not trying to forget about it and not saying, "Well, I can't admit my mistakes to my children. That makes me look weak or something." No, it doesn't. You have to admit your mistakes to your children. If you've done something wrong, said, "Daddy didn't handle that right, and here's what I should have done, and I want you also to learn from me what not to do. I messed up there, and I did the wrong thing, and you shouldn't handle it the way I did, and I'll promise to do better in the future, but I messed up there." And that's what good parents do. We have to acknowledge when we've done something wrong, and the father does that here. Right? He had that momentary slip, but he acknowledged what he did was wrong and gave it back. Now, they went and gave the man his stuff back, but the man was nowhere to be found. And so they left his clothes and stuff there for the man to come back and get it where they found him. And we never know if the man came back and got his stuff or not. We don't know. But at least they made the effort to do the right thing there. And I would think that the man's naked. He probably didn't make it very far. But he probably didn't. He was scared to respond when they were calling out to him. He didn't want to. They just threatened him with a gun. He didn't want to go back out there. He probably came and got his clothes when they left and went on. They never saw the thief again. But the boy kept the man from sliding down that path of evil there, and that's just a testament to the morality of the boy. He protects the man's conscience. He protects the man's soul, just like the man protects the boy's body, physically protects him. It's just a good little dynamic there between the father and the son. And kids do that all the time. They really do.
Yeah.
They keep me from, I may want to act a certain way, but I know I can't for the sake of my kids.
Right.
It wouldn't be a good example. And that's just entirely true. That's just real. That's the real world. Kids keep their parents, they make their parents better people. Just simply by existing, they make you better people. And in a lot of times, kids point out that child's perspective. I really do believe this. There's a certain innocence to children, and I think we as adults sometimes tend to be kind of hard sometimes. And a child keeps, especially, and I can say this from a man's point of view, children keep men compassionate and remind them of that innocence and kind of help them remember, I need to be a little more gentle. Here, I don't need to be so angry. I need to control myself. I need to act more innocently, more righteously. And children just have a huge impact on adults. They really do. They really do.
As a man's strength, the purpose of a man's strength is to protect others, to serve others. And I guess a child reminds you of that constantly, that your strength is not for yourself to use to get what you want. It's to serve others.
And I think that one thing here that we mentioned heroes, the father looks up to the son here. But let's be honest, the boy looks up to the father too. I mean, this father is basically his hero because he's acting just like his father. He's doing everything in a good way, the way the father told him to do it. And there was one line here, speaking of heroes, every hero has to have that good little tough guy phrase, and one of just the toughest things that I thought was really cool here. The son asks the man, "What's the bravest thing you ever did?" And the man who's coughing up blood, who's dying and living and protecting his son in this dying world, the father says, "Getting up this morning." That was the bravest thing. That really is just a quintessential tough guy line right there. I thought, I read that and I just kind of chuckled. No, that's great. That's just great. Getting up this morning was the bravest thing he ever did. That's one of those Clint Eastwood sort of tough guy lines. I just thought it was really cool.
It's true too. I mean, and you do see the father made this mistake, and he's not the perfectly virtuous in every way, but he is a virtuous man. He persists. He hangs on to hope, and he keeps going to try to bring his son to some better place, even though he's dying and he knows it. So I do think I think the father does set a good example for his son in other ways. He needed his son to bring him back from the brink, that's for sure. But he also does model good behavior for his son in other ways.
And that is brave.
He models courage.
Yes, exactly. And courage isn't just fighting physically off the bad guys. Courage, and this is more of an everyday application of courage. He really messed up, the father did. He really messed up. But he atoned for it, and he didn't let it stop him. He kept moving forward. The father didn't just lay down and die. He made his mistake. He learned from it. He got up and moved on, and he's moving forward for the sake of his son. And that's bravery right there. It's not letting your mistakes get you down, learning from your mistakes. And that's bravery on a daily basis that we all can exercise. And the father does that here. What's the bravest thing you ever did? Getting up this morning to keep on moving forward, not laying down and dying, getting hung up on my mistakes, but making it right and moving on. That's brave. That's everyday bravery, right? It's everyday bravery.
Well, it's hinted that it might have been too late for that thief. I mean, he might have already died, and we can't always undo our mistakes, but it's not too late for us to be healed of the damage we've done to ourselves by making those mistakes.
Right.
And I think that's what the father models, yeah.
And neither one of us here are advocating some sort of sociopathic approach. Well, I messed up and I'm just going to move on. I'm not going to think about it ever again. I'm not going to feel bad about it. No, I'm not saying that's the right way to handle it. And the father does. He feels bad about it, but he doesn't let his mistakes define him. He doesn't let failure become a way of life, and he learns and goes forward a wiser man and realizes, I can't do that. I can't give myself over to those emotions like that. And that's true bravery right there, is having the strength to get up and keep moving forward and learning your lesson, and, and making it right. That's bravery.
Well, that's right. Yeah. And to say, no matter what mistakes I've made, I know God still wants to save me. And to say, I'm not going to give over to despair or, whatever else, to say, I understand and I'll accept that grace from God, even though maybe I can't undo this, or that I don't have to live with being the person who did that, because God can heal that. He wants to heal that, and he can.
Yes, exactly. That is exactly true. All right, now we get on to Evie. I'll be honest with you. I have never cried at a book. Okay, as a father, especially when you start having children, I don't know if you. It does kind of open up. At least it's done with me. I don't cry all the time like some sort of sissy or anything, but I mean, I do cry. I'm not ashamed to say I cry when it calls for it. And there are things that really touch me and really matter that make me cry, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. I've never ever cried at a book. I can't read the ending of this book, and even still, knowing what's going to happen, and not tear up some. This part with the father's death. Mm-hmm. Oh man, and I just, and he lays down and he's dying, and he knows he's dying, and he physically can't go on anymore, and his son's got to sit there with him and hold his hand, and he knows that this is a dangerous world, and he's not going to be there to protect his son. He's not going to be there to watch over him. And what does he tell his son to do? He tells his son to keep going. Do everything the way we did it. I've taught you. I can't go on with you physically, but my teachings and my wisdom and the things that I have instilled within you, that fire that I have helped kindle and keep burning within you, do everything just the way we've always done it. We have set this standard for ourselves. We carry the fire. That's who we are. You keep doing that even though I'm not here. And just the fact, just knowing that that's the situation you're sending your son into, and you've now got to trust, the truth of the lessons of the integrity that you've instilled within your son, and trust that that's enough to get him through this hard world. And I again, McCarthy here, who seems to be a bit of a gun nut, which is good. And he tells his son, he's not naive about it either. Keep the gun with you at all times. You're going to need to carry the fire spiritually, but you've got to protect yourself physically too. Keep the gun with you at all times. And he tells his son, you need to find the good guys. And he kind of admits it. Those good guys are out there. You need to find the good guys. But look what he also does. He tells him, but you can't take any chances. Keep that hope alive, but don't be a fool. Be rationally optimistic, but don't be naive. You got to find the good guys, but don't take any chances. You have to carry the fire, because I can't, where I'm going, like back there on the beach with the ship, where I'm going, you can't follow me here. Somebody has to stay back and tend to our stuff. Somebody has to stay back and keep carrying the fire. And son, that's you. My time to move on has come. Take everything that I've taught you and carry it with you wherever you go. Be a man, protect yourself, but be wise about it. Don't be a fool, but keep yourself. Find the good guys. Keep yourself rationally optimistic. And now there's one thing I want to read. Well, what do you think about that? And I want to tell you something I read real quick. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think in the end, the boy does have to take a chance, because if he doesn't take a chance, it means certain death. But it's a calculated risk when he speaks to the man who finds him, and he takes that code of morality that he's learned from his father and sort of tests that man against it. And he makes that judgment that this is a good guy, I can take this chance. But if he hadn't taken that chance and he stuck around where his father had died, he wouldn't have made it. So
right.
Even though the father, I think, even to his death, wants to say, well, don't take any chances, but you have to. You
do, and that's
and he
true.
Taught him how to do it.
Yes, that's exactly right. Evie, I couldn't have said that any better. That is exactly right. you have to take certain risks, but you've got to be careful. But you can't be so careful that you never take risks. If you don't take risks, you'll miss out on stuff, and you don't want to miss out on the good guys. But you'll miss out on them if you don't take a risk. But don't take a foolish risk. Don't be reckless.
Yeah.
Be rational in taking your risks. Be calculated risks. And there's a little thing here. You remember the little boy that the son saw in our last episode, the little boy that they saw, and
right.
as his father's dying, the boy brings that up. He says, "Do you remember that little boy, Pop?" And the man says, "Yes, I remember him." And then the son says, "Do you think that he's all right, that little boy?" And the father says, "Oh yes, I think he's all right." And the boy says, "Do you think he was lost?" And the father says, "No, I don't think he was lost." And the boy says, "I'm scared that he was lost." And the father says, "I think he's all right." And the boy says, "But who will find him if he's lost? Who will find that little boy?" And the father says, "Goodness will find that little boy. It always has. It will again." And this is what good authors do. He's not just speaking about that little boy. He's talking about his son here. This is the subtext here. It's a way of saying it without saying it. This applies to the little boy. The little boy's father is dying. Do you think that little boy is lost? Do you think he was lost? And the father says, "No, he won't be lost." And he says, "Well, what's going to happen to him? Who will find him?" And he says, "Goodness will find that boy, because it always has," he says, "and it will again." And see, it's just that the father truly at the end, he didn't give himself over to some sort of cynical, bitter nonsense. There really is true goodness out there. And how do I know? Because I'm looking goodness in the face right now. I'm looking at you, son. Goodness will find you, because goodness attracts goodness, right? Now, goodness can also attract danger. Somebody wants to try to take advantage of somebody who's good and innocent. And that's why he's trained his boy to be innocent and be good, but also be tough, and not be a fool. But goodness, and that's what he's telling his son here. You are that little boy. Goodness will find you. It's found you before, and it will find you again. Goodness will attract goodness. And it's his way of kind of saying, without saying it, I trust in God to take care of you here, because who is good? God is good. And I trust that God will take care of you, because you are carrying that fire, son.
Now you read that little boy is the same little boy that belongs to the family that finds the son at the end, right?
Yes.
So it goes both ways. I mean, that
it does.
The son, goodness finds the son, but I mean that same little boy, if you see the son is bearing goodness does find the little boy, the little boy that he's been thinking about in the form of the son. The son
That's
comes
exactly
to the
right.
little boy, has the friend that he's wanted through the whole story.
And that bigger family that he's wanted too, and that's McCarthy's way of kind of signaling a happy ending here in the midst of all this. Goodness will find that boy. It's his way of kind of telegraphing what's about to happen, right?
Yeah.
And that's what really keeps this book. We'll get to this when we get to the closing thoughts, but I mean, this book really could have gone in a dark direction. And just a really nihilistic and nasty direction. But it's McCarthy always kind of takes you up to that point and then brings you back and kind of throws just this complete sweetness and complete innocence and complete hope and good and light and that's been the theme of this whole book, all this dark, and he just puts those little flashes of light in there, and he really keeps it from going in a dark direction and really, really makes it a really sweet book. All right, so we've telegraphed here. I'll get to more of that in our closing thoughts here in just a second. All right, so the father dies, and the son sits there with him for a while, and doesn't know what to do. And he's just sitting there with his father. And the boy then sees someone coming. He sees a man coming down the road. And the boy stood in the road and waited, the pistol in his hand. Now, this is a man right here. This boy is starting to act like a man. He sees somebody coming. He doesn't just run away and hide and cry. He stands up in the road. He waits to see what the man is all about. The boy is actually going to start doing what he wants to do now. He wants to try to find the good guys. And he's going to, rather than avoiding everybody, he's going to see if this is one of the good guys. But McCarthy pointed out, he's got that pistol in his hand just in case he's not. So the boy is doing exactly what the father told him to do. Find the good guys, but don't take any chances. And he's going to find out if this guy is the good guy, but he's got that pistol in his hand and he's ready to use it just in case he's not. So the boy is doing exactly what the father tells him to do. And there's a really cool, back and forth. I'm not going to read it all here. Really cool back and forth between the boy and this man here. And the man comes up to him. This man is real. You can tell he's survived in this world. He's got some battle scars. He's got ammunition. He's got a gun. He's a veteran of old skirmishes, as McCarthy describes him. When he spoke, his mouth worked imperfectly. When he smiled, one eye was wandering. He had scars across his cheek. So this is a man who's had to face evil in this world and who's lived to tell about it. And so the man asks the boy, walks up to him, and he says, "Who's the man, or where's the man you were with?" And the boy said, "He died." So this man obviously knows that there was a man and boy. They've been following them. Because remember back earlier, McCarthy's he said that the father he had this sense they were being watched, but he didn't see anybody. This family has been following him. This boy that they see, that's the boy that they came across, and they've been watching them to see if these are the good guys, to see if these are people that maybe they could join up with, I guess. It didn't really say why they were following him, but these were the people that had been following him. And he walks up to him, "Where's the man you were with?" And the boy says, "He died." And this man says, "Was that your father?" And the boy says, "Yes, he was my papa." And what does the man here say? He says, "I'm sorry." So he actually shows some heart and shows some condolence. And the boy just flat out says, "I don't know what to do." And the man says, "I think you should come with me." And the boy says, "Are you one of the good guys?" And it says, the man pulled back the hood from his face. His hair was long and matted. He looked up at the sky as if there were anything there to be seen. He looked at the boy. And he said, "Yeah, I'm one of the good guys. Why don't you put the pistol away?" Because remember, the boy is kind of aiming the pistol at him here. And the boy says, "I'm not supposed to let anyone take the pistol no matter what." And the man proves that he's one of the good guys here. He says, "I don't want your pistol. I just don't want you pointing it at me." And the boy says, "Okay." And they say, ask him some other stuff. "Where's your stuff? You got some blankets?" And he says, "Well, I had some blankets. I've wrapped my papa in them." And the man says, "Show me." And so the man, watched him. He, goes and, kind of looks and see where his father is. And the man tells the boy, he says, "Look, you got two choices here. There was some discussion about whether to even come after you at all. You can stay here with your papa and die, or you can go with me. If you stay, you need to keep out off the road. I don't know how you made it this far, but you should go with me. You'll be all right." And the boy says, "How do I know you're one of the good guys?" And the man says, "You don't. You're just going to have to take a shot. In other words, you're going to have to take one of those calculated risks." Right. And the boy asks him a question. He says, "Are you carrying the fire?" The man says, "Am I what?" The boy says, "Carrying the fire." And the man says, "You're kind of weirded out, aren't you?" And the boy says, "No." The boy says, "No." And the man says, "Just a little." And the boy says, "Yeah." And the man says, "Well, that's okay." And the boy says, "So are you?" The man says, "What, carrying the fire?" The boy says, "Yes." And the man says, "Yeah, we are." So he mentions there's more than one of them here. We are carrying the fire. And then the boy, look, this proves that the boy is learning how to think. He asks a thoughtful question here. He says, "Do you have any kids?" That's a thoughtful question there to ask. And the man says, "We do." And the boy says, "Do you have a little boy?" The man says, "We have a little boy and we have a little girl." And the boy says, "How old is he?" And the man says, "He's about your age, maybe a little older." And the boy says, "And you didn't eat them?" And the man says, "No." And the boy says, "You don't eat people?" And the man says, "No, we don't eat people." And the boy says, "I can go with you." The man says, "Yes, you can." The boy says, "Okay, then." The man says, "Okay." And look how he's applying the standards of morality that he and his father used. And he's taking those standards and he's saying, "Do you live by these standards? These standards of objective morality. Do you eat people?"
Right.
"No, we don't." "Well, are you carrying the fire?" "Yes, we are." And then one last thing here real quick. So the father, the man helps the boy kind of gives him some time to say goodbye to his father. You know, he kind of helps cover him up there. They didn't want to just leave him there uncovered. So he kind of helps cover him up. And so he gives the boy a blanket, says, here, take this, you're cold. The boy tried to hand him the pistol, but the man wouldn't take it. You hold on to that, he said. The boy said, okay. The man says, do you know how to shoot it? The boy says, yes. And the man says, okay. The man didn't want to take his gun. And this here is, they don't eat people. And if he were looking to take advantage of this boy, what is the first thing he would do? He would take that loaded gun away from him. But he says, I don't want to hurt you. In fact, I want you to be able to take care of yourself. You keep that. And that's how this man proves that he's one of the good guys. He lets this boy keep his only form of defense. He does not take his gun away. And he lives by the same standard of morality that the boy and his father did. And that's how the boy knows that these are the good guys. And the boy does an excellent job of handling the situation. And McCarthy, the way McCarthy frames it is really very well done. What was your impression of this whole scene here, this interaction?
I think it does show that the boy has learned how to test people, how to take a standard and apply it. But he does also have to take that risk at the end. He has to decide, this seems to be a good person. Am I going to take the chance or am I not? And he goes with it. Another thing for me from this scene, I like the attention to sort of burying the father as best they can. I mean, you see throughout, they're encountering all these dead bodies that have just been left on the porch or left in houses. And you see here, they're treating the body with dignity. And to me, that is a symbol of hope. When we bury a body, it's in the hope of resurrection. And it's also shows care for the dignity of what that person was. But I really like that. I think that shows the morality. And another thing that shows the morality of the people that the boy's going to go with is the man told him that he would use one of the blankets to bury the father. And when the boy goes up to say goodbye to his father, he sees that the man kept his promise and he did cover him with the blanket. I mean, someone who wasn't trustworthy might have said, well, hey, I'm just going to take all these blankets. We can use that blanket. It's useless to cover up this man. But it shows regard for the dignity of the father, and also that he keeps his promises to this little boy that he's just met. So there was a lot I liked about that scene.
And that proves that he is a good father himself. He said, we have a little boy and a little girl. And he knows how to handle children and how not to lie to children. And so he's got proof. This is proof here that he himself is a good man and a good father too. And he will be a good father to this, a father figure at least, to this boy. And you made an excellent point there. The man does these little things that proves that he's a good man. And see, that's one thing I like about McCarthy as a writer. He doesn't just say the man had a dignified air about him, or you could smell the integrity coming off this man. You know, something cheesy like that. You know, I mean, these little details that if you pay attention, he shows his morality through these little actions. And like you mentioned there, he does keep his word. He does put a blanket over the man, and he does treat him with dignity and respect, because that was a human being, and not just a human being, but it was this boy's father. And it's important to this boy that his father's corpse here be respected. And the man does that. He does treat him with the respect. And again, this is just I'm just going to say this, and I'm not going to get into a big diatribe about it, but this applies to the real world. Somebody who's looking to take advantage of you will look to take away your means of self-defense. And if this man were looking to take advantage of this boy, he would have the first thing he would have done was take that gun away. His means to defend himself, because that man was stronger than that boy, and that gun was the only thing that gave that boy the advantage. And the man says, I don't want your gun. I want you to keep that. I want you to use it when you need to. And that is the signal of a good somebody who respects you. I want you to be able to defend yourself. I don't want to take your gun away from you. I want you to be able, you have a responsibility, a moral responsibility to defend yourself, and not to just defend yourself, but we're welcoming you here into our family, and I expect you to not only take care of yourself, but there's going to come a time you may have to, help me, because this man is a veteran of skirmishes. You may have to help me fight off some people, and I want you to be able to, you know how to use that gun? The boy said, yeah. You know how to shoot it? Yeah. Okay, good, way to go. I want you to hold on to that, because it's your responsibility to take care of yourself and the other people in this new family of yours here. And I think that's just one of the signals of being a good guy. He's not trying to take the gun away from the boy. He wants him to be able to defend himself. And I think that's an example for real life. You should be suspicious of anybody who wants to take away your means of self-defense. If somebody is really looking out for your best interest, they will want you to be able to take care of yourself, and not only take care of yourself, but to be able to help those people around you. And I was explaining this to my son the other day. We're not like bears or lions or something where we have natural defenses. We don't have claws and fangs, and pretty much every animal out there is stronger and faster than we are. God just didn't. We're not like Wolverine, where I can just, and have claws come out of my hands. We can't do that. So we need means of self-defense, tools and weapons and this sort of thing. And that's the way we protect ourselves in this society is the gun. And I'm not some maniac. Our guns are tools. They are respected, and they're respected around my house. And I've let my son shoot a gun and learn how to shoot a gun and to treat it with respect. And when my girls get older, you make dang sure that I'm going to teach them how to shoot a gun too, because I want them to be able to protect themselves and to treat a gun and respect it for what it is. It is your way of meeting your God-given responsibility of protecting yourself. And not only protecting yourself, but the people that you love. And the fact that this man didn't want to take this boy's gun away proved that he was a good man and that he had this boy's best interest at heart.
I think that's a really interesting point. And just to get back to McCarthy as a writer, this man only appears on 5 or 6 pages, but just the physical description and the actions he takes and the things that he says, we have, in my mind, such a clear picture of what kind of man he is. And I think that just a few words, McCarthy has given us such a vivid picture, and I think that shows his skill as a writer.
It does. He's the physical description, he's a very hard man. He's a very tough man. He is a man who is capable of violence. Because, he's a veteran of skirmishes, and he bears the scars of those skirmishes. But and this is what makes a real man, okay? That's what Jordan Peterson talks about. A good hero, a good man needs to be a controlled monster, a civilized monster. You are capable of creating great harm, but you make the moral choice not to. And you only act monstrous when the situation calls for it, but you're a controlled monster, and you act civilized. But when the time comes, you need to protect yourself, you need to protect your family, you need to protect other people. You have it in you to physically do what you need to do in a controlled way. You don't just give yourself over to wrath, but you do it a rational self-defense, physical self-defense. And that's what this man, he is a hardened man. Okay, but he shows that he's civilized too. He treats the boy's father with respect. He treats the boy with respect. He expects him to take care of himself. He cares about the boy, and he's acting very civilized. But he's also able to defend himself if need be. He's also able to do great harm, when it comes to protecting himself. And I think that's what every man should aspire to be. You don't want to be a violent man. You want to be a civilized man. But let's face it, we live in a hard world. And you're put in a position where you have to defend yourself or defend the people that you love or defend the ideas that you care about. You better be able to do that, or else you're going to get killed real quick, and the people you love are going to get killed real quick, especially as a man. It is my job to protect this family. If there's a bump outside at night, I'm not going to send my wife out there to go check it out.
Right.
I'm going to say, I'll go make sure the kids are okay. You go out there, sweetie, and check it out. What kind of man would I be if I did that? Because God has built me physically. I'm the stronger of the two of us. And it's my job as the stronger of the two to rationally protect my family. And I think this man is a good example of that. I think McCarthy does a good job of showing that he is capable of violence when need be, but he's also civilized. And he's also capable of, and not just civilized, he's got a compassionate side to him. He treats the son's father with respect, and he does, like you mentioned out, he does cover the man with the blanket and try to give him a proper burial as best they can. They don't really bury him, but they do cover him there. And that shows his compassionate side too.
Yeah, I agree. And he's in a world where he is called upon to act violently more frequently than in the world we live in, and more frequently than is an ideal. And like one thing we've been talking about throughout is living in a world like that can harden you. And I think just in the few pages we see this man, the respect he shows to the father's body, his compassion towards the little boy, we see that he has that strength, that even that violence hasn't hardened him to the point that he doesn't see the dignity of other people. I guess maybe this is leaping too far. He understands that the purpose of violence, when he has to use it, is to protect the dignity of his family. And that whenever you do act violently toward another human being, it is still another human being. And that is something we have to keep in mind, that there are situations where it's called upon that you have to, because of the dignity of the people you love, or to protect yourself, but it's always another human being that you're dealing with.
Right.
And I think that this man hasn't lost touch with that, and you see that with the way he interacts with the little boy and with the body of the father.
We'll wrap up this. You mentioned that here, and we'll wrap this part up here with this. The boy says, "What about my papa?" And the father says, "There's nothing else to be done." The man says that, and the boy says, "I think I want to say goodbye to him." And the man could have been harsh, said, "No, you come on. It's time to go. We're exposed out here. It's time to go." What does he say? He says, "Will you be all right?" The boy says, "Yes." And the man says, "Go ahead. I'll wait for you." You know, and he allows the boy to go back and grieve. He walked back into the woods, knelt beside his father. He was wrapped in a blanket as the man had promised, just as you pointed out. The boy didn't uncover him, but he sat beside him, and he was crying, and he couldn't stop. He cried for a long time. And then the son tells his dead father, "I'll talk to you every day, and I won't forget, no matter what." Then he rose and turned and walked back out to the road. And it said the boy cried for a long time. This man gave that boy as much time as he needed to say goodbye to his father. And he sat there and waited and let that boy grieve. And just, he didn't come hassle him and say, "Okay, it's time to go, wrap it up." He gave him all the time he wanted. And again, that he doesn't explicitly, that's in the subtext there, you know, but that says a lot about the man too, that he actually cares about the boy, and that he actually is a sensitive guy, and he is an understanding, rational man, a compassionate man. And and it shows the boy is going to be in good hands. Goodness has found the boy, just like the father said. Goodness has found that boy. The father was good with him, and when the father passed on, this family takes him in. And as we see, they do have a family. The woman, when she saw him, put her arms around him and held him. And so you've got the mother doing the motherly thing here. The man doesn't touch him. The man doesn't give him a hug, not a pat on the back or anything. You know, it's kind of a manly thing to do, I guess. You know, some men are kind of, when it comes to being affectionate with children, they're not really comfortable with that. But the woman does the complete womanly thing here. She sees the boy and she gives him a hug, you know, and she welcomes him in. She says, "I'm so glad to see you." And now it's almost like they feel like they've known each other, because this family has been watching them. And so in a sense, they know the boy. The boy doesn't know them because they've been following them and watching them. And in a sense, this family knows who they're taking in. He's not just a total stranger to them, you know. They know a little bit about him. And she said, "I'm so glad to see you." And then it says that the woman would talk to him sometimes about God. Yeah, this woman here talks to the boy about God. And he tried to talk about God, but the best thing the best thing was to talk to his father, and he did talk to him, and he didn't forget. The woman said that was all right. She said that the breath of God was his breath, yet through it passed from man to man. Yeah, though it passed from man to man through all of time. And, so you've got God mentioned here again. This is a good family.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what the boy has
Yeah.
wanted from the beginning. You've got a husband, you've got a wife. He's got now a brother and a sister. And the boy has the family and the companionship that he wanted. The boy is he's got a good future here. He's found the good guys, people that really care about him and respect him. And that's why people who want to read The Road and say this book is nihilistic and blah, 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 it's not. It's really not. That's such a sweet way to wrap up such a harsh book. And it's real, there is harshness in life, but there is also just sweetness and innocence and respect and love and good and family. And McCarthy does an excellent job of capturing how harsh the world can be, and the world in its worst moments, and the world in its best moments too. And I think we see here that the light always outweighs the dark. The light always shines bright in the darkness and overcomes the darkness. And there are people who give themselves over to the darkness and they're not as happy, and they're not as, they have no future, and they just lose their humanity. And those people who strive to be human, who strive to reflect the image of God and carry that fire, those are the people who truly succeed in life. And I think this book does a good job of getting that lesson across.
Yes, absolutely. And that last paragraph, it's sort of poetic and mythical, and I'm not sure what it means, but to me, it's sort of like, let's zoom back from this story and understand there's a deeper wisdom behind everything that's happening here that we can't understand.
Yeah, and he kind of did this with, I just, off the top of my head, No Country for Old Men. He kind of ended with old Ed Tom there talking about a dream he had, and then he kind of ends with some sort of almost like dream sequence here sort of thing, and McCarthy's kind of noted for doing it. And again, I don't understand exactly what that means either. It's symbolic of something, and I would love somebody to kind of tell me exactly, what they think it means. I'll need to study it a little bit more. But It is exactly right. Now, Evie, we've reached the end of the book here. What are your closing thoughts about the book?
Well, I'm glad we picked it. It's like you said, so many people think this is bleak, and that's exactly what I expected. It's why I hadn't read this book before. But I loved all these pinpricks of light in the darkness. I thought it was beautiful. I don't know if this is one I'm going to reread repeatedly or not. I guess time will tell, but I certainly got a lot out of it. And it's one of those books that you think about, your mind circles back to it, and there's so much more to keep contemplating. So I think this is a wonderful book.
And that's one good thing. That's just on a technical note. That's one of McCarthy's strengths as a writer. He does put a lot into the subtext. He's not one of these hack writers who has to spell everything out for you. He puts a lot into the subtext, and you have to do a lot of thinking with McCarthy and his stories. And that's why I love his writing. He really respects his reader. He expects the reader to do some work here too. He's like, I'm not going to just spoon feed you this. You're going to have to put some effort in. And I really like that. And this is the best. I think this is my favorite novel, I think. And had I read this as a single man, I might have thought differently. Now, I didn't read this until I became a father. And I think that probably plays a dynamic in it too, is because you picture yourself, and I'm a father of a son. I have 3 girls and 1 boy. And whether it's a girl or a boy, it doesn't matter. As a father, you can put yourself in this situation. And you can just, McCarthy, you can tell he's a real father. He has children, obviously, and because a single man, I don't think would have been able to write some of these nuances here. As a father, it really hits you in a different way. As if, like I said, if I were a single man, I don't think it would have hit me emotionally. I wouldn't have been able to understand it emotionally. It wouldn't have resonated with me as much as it did being a father. And like I said, I told you I like about Jesus. He shoots you straight. He tells you exactly how it's going to be. It's going to be hard times. There's going to be good. You persevere in the good, and you will be rewarded in due time. There's always hope out there, and you just, you overcome the world like I did, And the only way we can do that is through Jesus Christ, through the indwelling power of the Holy Spirit, to live out God's word in our life. And that's how we get to that goodness at the end of this world. But I do like that McCarthy here. It is very bleak. It is very dark, and it's kind of disturbing. It's not overly like violent or anything, but it's like the concepts and some of the imagery that he puts in your head. If you stop and allow yourself to think about, like we talked about that caravan of depravity, with those sex slaves and all that other stuff, and then that cannibal house, and then that dead baby that they found. These are very dark and disturbing images. And and then the eating and all that stuff, eating people. But then on the flip side of that, like I said, just some of the sweetest, most, it just brings a tear to my eye every time to read this story. I'm sad that the boy, and I think, again, coming at it from a father's perspective, I'm sad that the father had to leave his boy. But I'm also, he follows up that sadness with just a good situation for the boy. It's a happy ending to this story. Even though the father dies, it's a happy ending. And that's real life. There's hardship and then there's victories. There is pain and there's happiness. There's sadness and there's happiness. And that's real life. The world can be a hard place and it can be a dark place. But it's just as hard and as dark as it can be. On the flip side of that, there's lightness and there's good. There's light and there's good, And I really like, he seems to have a good handle on reality here. And I like it. You're not trying to sugarcoat it, and you're not being dark and bleak and nihilistic either. You're finding that balance that accurately reflects how reality is in this world, in this age. And McCarthy does an excellent job of that. And that's one thing I really respect about this book.
Yes, there's darkness in the world, but in the end, light overcomes.
It does, exactly. And that's what we need to remember. You're going to have loss. And the boy said himself, I don't know what to do. And God is going to send good people. Goodness will find that boy. It always has. It will again. And as long as we keep our faith in Jesus Christ, and we prove our faith, we prove our love for Christ by living out his word in our lives. Jesus said, in the book of John, if you love me, you will keep my commands. In John 15, he says that repeatedly. And that's how anybody can say they love Jesus. But how do you know that the people who truly love Jesus, those are the people who live out his word in their daily lives. And as long as we do that, we will overcome the harshness and the darkness of this world. And this is a good lesson here. As long as we keep carrying that fire, we don't allow the world to snuff out that fire within us, but we live as we were created to be. We are all imagers of God. And if we strive to carry that fire of God's presence and God's image in our lives, we will overcome the hardships and darkness of this world, and we will have a happy ending at the end of our story, whenever that may be, for ourselves, because of God's grace and his mercy in our lives. Goodness always overcomes darkness. It always does. Goodness always overcomes evil. The good guys always win in the long run, and I mean in the long run on God's timetable. Not the long run. I mean, there are plenty of people who have died unjustly, but they will prove victorious because God will make that happen. Those who are in him are victors. And that's one thing I like about the boy in this book. He doesn't want to just survive. It seems like sometimes the father is just in survival mode. The boy actually wants to live. And there's a big difference between just surviving in the world and actually living in the world. Part of living in the world is building good relationships with people around you, family, friends, actually carrying the fire, standing for something, living for something, having that living a life of integrity. And so when everybody else, they may give themselves over to the darkness, but you are that pinprick of light in the midst of darkness. That means something, and that's what makes life meaningful. And that's what makes life worth living is, those other pinpricks of light in the world. And I could go on in my praise for this book, but I'll end up repeating myself over and over. But it's really, Evie, wouldn't you agree? I don't think I'm being too glowing here. I would say this is a sweet book. Despite,
yes, that is not what I expected at all. But to me, it just has so much hope, because the whole point of hope is bad things can happen, but we believe that in the long run, whether we can see it or not, that eventually that story is going to come right at the end. And that's what I come away from this book with, is just such a strong sense of hope. And I think that's what the boy has. And I think that the reader picks up on that. And to me, it just strengthens my hope in real life.
And that's one of the things I like about good books. I like a good plot. I can get really interested in the concept of a book and the plot and that sort of thing. But what really makes a story good for me are good characters that I can actually get behind. And this is what makes a book really good for me, is somebody that I can aspire to be like, And the boy here, and even the father, these are people that I want to be like. I no matter how hard it gets, I never want to quit. I always want to be vigilant. I want to keep carrying the fire. And that's what always takes a book from being good in my mind to being great, is it's got, and this doesn't really have much of a plot to it. This is really just following these characters here. And these are really well done characters. And they are characters that I aspire to want to be like. And that's what draws me to this book. Characters that I really sympathize with. And I want to interact with people like that. Those are the kind of people that I want to be. And those are the kind of people that I want to be around. I want to take the good qualities of that and apply that to my life. And McCarthy's done that here with these characters in this book.
I think it's a wonderful book.
Okay. All right, Evie. Well, I think we've, yes or no, did you like this book?
Yes, I did.
Would you recommend this book to somebody else?
Yes.
Okay. I would not recommend it to my 11-year-old boy. But when he gets to be older, I will recommend that he read this book.
12. When he gets to be 12.
12. That's right. That's right. Okay. All right, Eddie. Well, look, I've really enjoyed this. I think we've had a good time.
Yeah, me too.
We've wrapped up. We've concluded our study of the road here. And join us again next time. We're going to have another book. Now, I chose this book. Okay. On our next series, you're going to choose the book and choose the story. And so we'll go at it from that perspective too. And I look forward to that. You have good judgment, and I trust your judgment. And I look forward to the next episode when we start a brand new book.
Which will be Pride and Prejudice.
Pride and Prejudice is the book. Okay, I'm excited about that. So that is quite a jump, though, from The Road to Pride and Prejudice, right? Both good books, but as far as like
books.
But as far as like style and, setting and that sort of thing, two completely different. I think people can tell what man chose what book and what woman chose what book.
I think that's right, but I think that you're going to get a lot out of it the same way I got a lot out of The Road by reading something that I wouldn't necessarily have chosen myself. Right. Which, The Road is a very masculine book, and yes. I think a lot of it, like you said, you relate to it as a father. And of course, I'm not a father or a parent, but I've gotten a lot out of hearing your reactions to that and the way that you see your experiences in the story. Now, I can't really claim to have had experiences like what we'll read about in Pride and Prejudice, but it's a very feminine, analytical perspective on the world, and that I relate to a lot. And I think you'll enjoy it a lot.
I'm looking forward to
it.
You won't,
maybe you will hate it, but
I doubt it. I'm always looking to learn, and I'm not one of these guys. That's a girly book. I'm not going to like that. No.
It's not though. It's not.
Masculine, feminine. They are equally wise, and they're they're equally good in their own ways. And so I'm very much looking forward to moving from The Road. And changing gears to moving to Pride and Prejudice. I'm excited about it, and that will be our next study. So, Evie, I've enjoyed this. I think we did a good job, and I look forward to Pride and Prejudice. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and end the show right here. I hope you've enjoyed our study of The Road. Be sure and join us next time when we take a look at Pride and Prejudice. Until then, have a good day. See you later.